All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get our nice show on the road. You heard that recording is in progress, so we have to be on our best behavior tonight. My name is Walt Tribely. It's my privilege and honor to be the Sheridan College president and to welcome you to the Sheridan College Foundation Cy Thickman lecture series. Mr. Thickman had a vision to feature Sheridan College faculty in roles of leadership within the area of their scholarship. And tonight is a great example of a faculty member who is a scholar. When I hired Kristine 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, she was homeless. She really was. She and her family, they were in transition from Yakima, Washington, and coming into a great town of Sheridan, I hope, and a great opportunity. Certainly, it's a great opportunity for us tonight. So a little bit about Kristine. Kristine got her undergraduate degree in economics from the University of Washington. It's a school that I know very well. It's a very, very good school. It's a large state university. It's a tier 1 research institution that doesn't hand out degrees because you're wonderful and pleasant. You have to bring some game. She got her master's degree from Seattle University, another fine institution in the same general area. She worked for Washington Mutual and quickly, upon her hire, advanced to portfolio management and managed a portfolio of $550 million. She then saw the light and turned to the best profession on earth, teaching, not the most lucrative profession on earth, the best, and started teaching for the University of Washington. And in that, I think you taught in the Industrial Systems Engineering program. So Kristine brings to us a data-based, evidence-based best practice. And that became evident in her interview with me and Dr. Garrison, and certainly those before that passed her up the chain to us. She's a compassionate, humble, empathetic, smart faculty member who's tackling a tough issue, one of homelessness. And homelessness has been attacked and addressed in many different states in many different ways. And I'm particularly interested in how you will take a systems approach and a data-based approach. It seems very refreshing to the other approaches. So please give a warm welcome to our faculty member, Kristine Mantey. Yes, here's Dr. Thickman. Hey! Right on in. Thank you.
Yeah, but maybe up here somewhere.
Mantey was teaching. No, you come right on up.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, we'll get the.
You got it. Yeah, we can rearrange chairs however folks are comfortable. Oh.
I know.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. I was gonna say, and I will try not to ramble. No, you know, they put me kind of over here in the corner, so you know, it's kind of like find your way. It's a great room. I've been here before, so this is good. I love it. So homelessness is such a topic, such an interesting topic to me. I was at the University of Washington, and just to give you some foundation as to, might use the microphone. Oh no. Okay. Someone did tell me where that was.
It's right up top there.
Okay. It's a test. For both of us. Yeah, needed a key. Good.
Good.
All right. Is that one working? This one is on. But then I have to stand over here. Do I have to stand over here? Can you hear me better here?
It won't record very real well unless you're ready. Yes, unless you have a mic.
Okay, if anything can happen, it will happen to me. It's all good. I gotta say, like all of us here, trying to figure out how it works, and it's just not. I
So
will try to be
Kristine-
louder.
Kristine teaches in our business program as one of our coordinators, and she's now going to use her teacher voice from the diaphragm and her presence, her physical presence in the room. In lieu of a
It's all good. So I was gonna say before I get started into my presentation. So really the motivator for what happened here was I was working in industrial and systems engineering. I was the business person in our cohort. There were 4 of us. They were all engineers. I was a business person. And my directive was to teach them engineering economics. So how do you make a business case to go with your engineering project? And I watched a bunch of different things. I didn't want to hit that many times. I watched a bunch of different things happen over the course, and that's going to be the methodology that I'm going to look at first. It's just going to be a brief look at what the methodology is when you're looking at a project of that nature. Then I will go more deeply into my actual work with project partners and my kind of stamp on it, I guess you would say. But what happens is there's this method that systems engineers, they work through. And what they do is they determine what the goal is of their project. And they try to have a lot of discussion about it, and they try to ask a bunch of questions about what is the purpose of this? What are the functions going to be? They ask these questions in such a way that they try to describe what the scenario is before and then after they get done with their project. They also try to figure out what is the motivation here? Why are we doing this? If it's in healthcare, is it to make sure that we have a better outcome? Think about when I first started into that process with those folks, they were like, well, think about if you went in for surgery and you were supposed to lose your right arm in the surgery, but you left without your left. That's bad. So that was kind of one of those motivators for barcodes, as they come in and they give you your stuff and they're not even looking at you, they're looking at your barcodes and everything. That motivated them to try to make it right so that folks wouldn't make mistakes. So they do this process, they validate their assumptions, they go through multiple iterations of this process, and then hopefully they've developed a bunch of alternative solutions. Those solutions can be crazy, they can be great. Maybe some of them get left on that drawing board. We just wait and see. They rank them, right? And then some of them fall off. And then they iterate through them again. They see, hey, we've got 2 or 3 that are potentials. We only need 1. We're only going to go with 1. So what does that look like? What is the best one? It could be, that was why they asked me there. It could be cost, right? It could be savings. It could be we start with a pilot. It could be a lot of different things. So then they take action. It really becomes a way of thinking. And so I had spent quite a few years with them. I can't actually remember now. I think it was like 6 or 7 years with them. And Seattle was beginning to have a lot of trouble with homelessness. We were at the time working on a project that was looking at water leaks. So municipal water systems leak a lot of water. I didn't actually know this until that project. And so they were like, this would be really great for our system if we could somehow seal up the leaks, or at least limit some of the leaks. Because for us as society, right, that's a cost to us and a resource that's going wasted. And then the next thing they had was they wanted to encourage folks to use smart home technology. And so someone brought a project to us, and it was to try to get people to adopt it. And I know now looking back, we're like, didn't this stuff always exist? But there was a lot of hesitation about, giving the internet access to your day-to-day life. So then the next thing we did, which was like, okay, so I was already thinking about homelessness as being a great project. And then we helped some egg producers. And I thought, if we can help egg producers that really want to get into a local organic market, and we can look at their process and what it would look like, what the benefits would be to them, what the real costs would be. Man, do I know a lot about eggs that I didn't know before. And there was just a whole bunch of costs that they hadn't thought of. So we helped them to look at what it would look like to be able to be in grocery stores. You know, what production level would you have to hit to be able to actually afford to do that? Because it was going to cost them a lot of money. So at this point, I said, hey, you know what? I've got this open-ended problem that's going to really encourage creativity in engineering students. It's going to be way outside of their box. And it's going to require the same methodology. We're going to look at detailed system diagrams. We're going to look at detailed requirements of what we need. And then we're going to consider, you know, what kind of decision-making method are we going to use? Because it could be cost, it could be politics, it could be space, it could be all kinds of things. And then we'll look at feasibility of your solutions. So I ran the first project myself as being a homeless service provider. And what I did was Microsoft had said, hey, we'll give you some money. Come to us with a great idea. And so this is actually some of the benefits that I tasked a bunch of students with this. So one of my teams was meant to look just at what would happen if you could keep people off the street to begin with and try to figure out what that would look like. Another one, I tasked them with looking at the problem of tent cities because I had this feeling that tent cities weren't a really great idea. And I really wanted some proof. I really wanted us to do some research into why, you know, if my gut was right or wrong. And they came back and they said, tent cities are a terrible idea. And they said it's because there's no system that connects these folks with any kind of services. They're just living in a tent, right? They don't have mailboxes. They don't have a phone system. They don't have a way of getting ready for work in the morning. You know, they don't have some of the things that we just take for granted. And so their idea was, if we just had this system that we could help these folks with some connection. Further on, this went into, hey, you know, the system, maybe it does look like a little bit of communal living that's maybe tent city-like within a building, so that we can provide those services on site. But the folks themselves, they could live inside the building, or this actually, it's cut off so that it's not so tiny. It had pellet shelters on the outside. So it combined the idea of having this kind of easy to stand up resource for people to live in, but providing services so that folks weren't traveling to services because they won't go to regular appointments and things. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about, which is kind of a fun one, I'll start with it when I start talking about my project partner, but we looked at leveraging technology to connect people with services. So if there's a place and there's someone who can put down, hey, these folks, they hire people, you know, they hire people for an hour here or 2 hours here. They need people right now. And you can put it on maybe a website or an application, you know, that goes on your phone or your tablet. Then people can access that and get resources that they need without being part of a service provider. This actually is a visualization of what it would look like if someone actually graduated from a program as a self-sufficient individual, but still needed maybe some of those support services. Maybe they don't have a regular job yet. You know, they might have a part-time job and they might be looking for full-time work. And so this would connect with them in a really convenient way that would kind of take them out of the shelter, right? I'm self-sufficient, I'm living on my own, but I can access the things I need here. So those are just a smattering of the different things that I have seen come out of this work. This is going into my 6th year. I'm not going to talk about them, but I have actually been connected with the Volunteers of America here because I was looking for a great organization. I'm always looking for an organization that actually fits some of the criteria that I know make for a successful organization. Acres of Diamonds is a small provider for women and children. They are in a very rural community outside of Seattle. So part of the thought there was that when you take people out of the city and they're actually in a rural area where they can breathe, that maybe that was part of their success. We actually looked at their success rate and it really was 94% when they would measure how many folks came in their door and then exited to be self-sufficient, you know, have a job, have a home, you know, not be taking assistance. One of their biggest things was that they really wanted young women to leave their system as self-sufficient young ladies so that they had their kids back and they wouldn't be dependent on someone else and possibly fall into a bad behavior. So they have a community home style. That's really important for me to note for you guys tonight, because a lot of times when we're looking at providing services to homeless folks, we're looking at that transactional kind of provision. You know, you don't have a place to sleep tonight, I've got a bed, here you go. That is not what this organization is. They are very community-based and they want people to be there as long as it takes. And they have a home for them. They put them in they have a room for them. They have a joined kitchen area. So they share a communal kitchen area so that they have relationship with other folks that they're in the program with. When they do this, they have a high staff to participant ratio, and that helps them to really keep on top of what's going on. And that means like the drug use, the alcohol use. Are you going to whatever you need to be going to? Is it school? Are you getting to school? You know, are you getting to your job training? So the goal of this at the end is to be stable, but the organization has a lot of goals. So they were providing for about 12 people when I started working with them. And they were in their business like that. And so you think, well, 12 people, it's not very many. It's really easy to check on 12 people all the time and be like, right in their business. We sometimes are with our students, right? Did you come to class today? I didn't see you, right? So you'd think, well, maybe that makes it easier for them. But they had some pretty awesome goals. They actually were looking to increase their size of their program. They also wanted to provide more training for their participants. They wanted to provide better mental health care for all the reasons we've probably all read. Mental health care is really important with this population of folks. And they also really wanted to make sure that people's kids had a regular place to stay so that when these women would go out to their job or when they go out to get training, they knew where their kids were going to go for the day. So they had all of these huge goals, but there was only a small team of folks. There was really only 3 people that were in the decision-making of it all. They had a few people working for them. So all in all, there were less than 10 on their staff. So they were making big things happen. They didn't have money really to add any people. So they're talking about mental health care services, right? And they didn't know where to begin. They didn't have any kind of methodology for deciding where should we go first. Some people gave them some resources to try to build a facility to do that daycare, because it takes space. But they didn't really know what to do there. They were working with an architect, but really didn't know what the building should look like. So it was funny. I had like a coffee appointment with their executive director. It was like, let's just go for coffee and chat. I was like, I don't even know if my boss will go for a project that's in homelessness, but I really want to talk to you anyway. And she thought, why not? What do I have to lose? So she met with me for coffee. And at the time I had no idea where it would end up. But these are some of the things that we talked about. Like, we talked about why their organization was so successful. And I asked her if they had ever tried to document the process that they went through with people, because it seemed to me as I listened to her speak about her people, that it was all based in their minds, right? They knew what to do. They knew what was going to be work, and they knew what was going to be success. And they knew who the people were that they needed to pull in. And if something happened to them, it was going to be a really bad day. So we had to establish what does your operation look like? So we tasked them with a bunch of questions to try to get them to write it down. And then we sat for hours actually discussing it. Then this expansion plan, what does this really look like? You can say you want to expand this college and you'd have the same problem, right? What kind of housing? Do we partner with someone else who provides housing? What would that look like? Do we start a daycare, or do we find a daycare that we can put our participants' kids into? Can we establish our own mental health care services, or do we hire someone outside to contract with us? We went through a lot of these questions. There's more. This is just a handful. And I put this diagram here because we'd start in the middle and we go around and around, and the doubts and things will enter in. So you say, well, I need a mental health care provider. Well, they cost a lot of money. Well, maybe I can get away with an intern. Right? But that doesn't really meet my goal. And so it would circulate around this diagram. Really, I think, shows it well. It would just keep circulating around until all of the ideas were fleshed out. So you're not meant to read this. But the first thing we did then with this whole set of questions, was to say, if we look at this question, does it send us down a path, or does it create more questions? And what exactly are we trying to get to? Like, what are we required? I'll stay with mental health care, right? So I said they were using an intern-based program. Well, if you send someone out because you can't have an intern doing all of that prescribing work and all of that, you have to send someone out. Do they then come back and meet with that intern? Like, how do you manage that? So there was just tons of questions about mental health care services and what would be the requirements. And then you have your HIPAA requirements, right? So you can see where I've just prepared like a few on this, but you try to get all the questions out, get them all out in the open. And then you can start to describe what's going on. So this one also, night chart, you describe exactly what is being provided by the organization. And by saying, hey, you know what, we can provide mental health care on site, but up to a point, and then we have to transfer them out. Does that maybe save us some money? I don't know. Back to the question. So now you see why it's iterative. So then we can do this thing that one student once said was the dream big function. So we've got all these questions, we've got all these things that we need to do. In a perfect world, in a perfect scenario, what will we provide for these people? What would it look like? And then we go through, and I love the way that this one is mapped out for you. That's why I put it here, because it looked at like, what can management do? What does the staff need to do? Volunteers are a big thing. Who doesn't want to volunteer to help people out? And so we went through and we said, hey, you know what would be all of the potential things that these folks could do, could add to maybe make our system more robust and help these individuals better. Then I told you we have to look at what's our philosophy. And I usually have this really ugly looking person right here. It's the negative stakeholder. Took it off. You know, that's the people who are like, homeless people want to be homeless. They don't want a home. So those people are out there in the wider environment. But it's really important. This is like when in business school, that's why I love this so much. That's why in business school, we look at the stakeholders. Like, who are all the people that are impacted by this? And I actually have a spot on here because I have to give a lot of credit to the student teams that I've been able to task with different things along the way. But we have this intended outcome of helping twice as many homeless people. And it lives in this world where the organization has to make it happen, right? But then we can see other people that we're going to have dialogue with, people we're going to have to engage. And what's our philosophy going to be? You know, how are we going to engage with those people? We can then actually look at some specific objectives. We can actually do this. This is very engineer. We can have these for everything that we plan on doing. I love these actually, but some people hate them. An objective tree will help you to figure out whether or not you're actually meeting that goal, right? You can say, hey, I have this very specific area of growth that I need to have. And these are all the people who I want to help. We've got a career development that's up here. We've got support for folks after they leave the program. You know, we've got the families, right? We want to be able to provide help for more families. So we've thought about how everyone is impacted by this cute little system, Acres of Diamonds. And who are all these people that we need to talk to? So now I get to show you what kinds of things came out of this work. So the first one is Beyond Acres. It's two things, actually. Beyond Acres actually became a product that was like housed in a binder to begin with. It was literally a binder because analog works, right? So they went out to that list of stakeholders and they said, I have these gals, they need all these different things. What have you got? And they put a catalog together of all the different services and things. It might even be work training programs, people who would hire them, all kinds of different stuff. It then moved, it's a techie community, right? So it moved to a website. I don't know that it ever has made it. We haven't talked about it actually, because you'll see why. But it made it to a website. I don't know that they're ever gonna make it into an app for your phone. It was surprisingly expensive to develop an app. I thought, how can it be, right? You see some of these little games and things that people make, but they really wanted it to have a messaging center, you know, try to keep it, if I had exited a program and I still wanted to contact someone on that staff, be able to quickly contact them, stay in relationship, because to Acres, it was really important to have that relationship. They needed a positive relationship to keep them out of homelessness. The next thing was the mental health care. It actually combined with the daycare, which is kind of cool that it turned out that way. A lot of the analysis was the same. We ended up looking at the biggest question that came out, which was, well, there's all kinds of government funding, but it must not cover the cost. Well, people had this in their head that it didn't cover the cost. And really, this is just a tiny little spreadsheet of what was required to run a daycare facility. It comes down to an amount per month that they needed for each child that was enrolled. And the shortfall versus like the state funding was really small. It was within $100. It was the kind of thing that they easily came up with this, I should point out it this way. They came up with this, these flyers. They had multiple flyers where you could sponsor a child in the program and you could buy specific items that they needed. Some of them were necessities and some of them were more fun things that they needed. And what was really neat about that was it was so simple. You know, they almost, the provider, Acres, almost didn't believe it, that it could be that simple, but it was. We checked the numbers many times and they actually did expand their daycare offerings because they were able to go to their donors with this information and they responded really well. Now the matrix above is what happens when you look at all of the different options of how you can provide mental health care services. There was just a ton of different ones. What ended up happening was they had their own requirements list and they had to look at the people that they were trying to provide services to. What kinds of services were they really looking to provide? You know, were they looking for folks who were experiencing hardcore addiction issues? Or was it more trauma-based issues that they were trying to provide for? And so when they did that, they were able to then narrow it down to what kinds of providers would be right. And then from there, they could figure out what the cost would be and whether or not it was feasible. They ended up actually hiring a couple of folks based on the matrix. They were able to get folks, one that prescribes and one that just kind of does like that triage work where they figure out what does this person need and gets them, you know, hooked up really well with those services. So it was pretty cool to be able to provide, this is in 1 quarter's worth of work, actually, this particular project. We were able to provide them with a way to expand their offerings very quickly. This actually got transferred to a task force that worked with myself and our students, because the financial model really lives in my world when I'm working with students. Make sure that they don't like run off the rails. And so we transferred this to a task force and they got it done within a year. It was really amazing. So then we get to my absolute love and the piece that I've been working on and is it's a work in progress. I've come to some points where I've been able to validate some of what I found, which is really neat. I was able to validate it actually with the gentleman that does program work at the VOA, and that was really, really exciting for me. I looked at data from not only Acres of Diamonds, but I actually worked with another provider in the Skagit Valley area, and I looked at their data as well. And it comes down to like 5 key things that people need to get to be self-sufficient if you fall into homelessness. And it's health, obviously, right? And that encompasses your drug addiction, your alcoholism, that kind of thing. But it can also be just self-care things like, you know, every once in a while you see that ad where people are getting their teeth replaced, you know, dental health care, you know, so that you have a nice smile, so you want to go out and meet people, right? All of that is encompassed in the health and wellness. Then the conflict management. A lot of times the conflict piece can cause people to fall out of a housing situation because the police are involved and they can't stay there anymore. And so now where do they go? And so that part is really key as well, because if you need counseling to get through how to work with people, or if you need some confidence so that you don't go back into a bad situation, that's all encompassed in that section. That can put us into personal responsibility though as well. You know, all of these interconnect a bunch, you know, making sure that you're in a good situation, taking care of your employment situation, making sure you go to work on time, very important. So that piece is in the personal responsibility. Financial is always the easiest for me as someone who lives in a numbers box. So it's always the easiest one for me to go into an organization and ask them all these questions and find out how their people are doing. You know, it's everything from having an emergency fund You know, you think about your car doesn't start and it's gonna cost you $500. I mean, everybody's tired of that when you go out and you turn it over, right, and it won't start. So that kind of thing can really throw somebody off if they're right on the edge. And then last but not least is parenting, and this can be both ways. This can actually be adult children who end up, you know, coming into their parents' world and needing money. Maybe they have problems of their own, right? And so they're kind of pulling their parent down. Or it can be young with young kids, and it doesn't have to be women. You know, it can be young families. Kids cost a lot of money. So that one is very important as well. So these are our 5 measures that I key in on. And again, an eye chart, but it's more for the idea rather than the specific numbers that are going on here. So what happens is if I get the ability to access data in an organization, I ask them all these questions about the 5 factors I've got. And then I look at each participant and I track their progress. So this one in the bottom here, you can kind of see it raised up. It's not gonna raise up really fast overnight. It's a 100-point scale. Folks come in anywhere, you know, 0, 5, 14, 20. And then you can see what happens when they have a stable living situation and they all of a sudden, right, they have a pop. Maybe they get a job. This 193 got a job with some extra hours, started to pop. I actually didn't include it, but I had one where they dropped off, and I just got the data from my data person, and I called her up and I said, something, I actually knew that one's name, and I said, something happened to her this month, and she goes, oh, that's so cool. She goes, but it's not cool. But she like, that's so cool. She said she lost some hours at work and she had to dip into her emergency fund. And I was like, I'm on to something. I have something here I can show. So this just represents what it would look like if I had multiple participants in those situations. And I can see in the different sections of color which areas they're working on. You can see that red conflict management at this particular snapshot in time was really small. It was because it was COVID, and all of the conflict management work at the organization was based off of relational stuff. And you couldn't have, we're in Seattle. People couldn't talk to one another. Actually, it should probably be, hey, they all have a perfect score, right? And no conflict. But we couldn't measure any of it. It was measured on things like group dinner, which you and I probably think, hey, everybody brings something to a buffet. It's great, no problem. In this kind of situation, that is a problem. Oh, the thing I told you to bring, you brought something else. Oh, you didn't bring enough, and now we don't have enough. You know, it's conflict, right? So this last one over here is the thing, it's like my Achilles heel. I actually really want to look at a change in people from their beginning in a program for like the first 30 to 60 days. And I want to contrast it with the most recent 30 to 60 days. And I really think that it'll be good to be able to do that. You can see that there's a lot more green at the bottom. That's because I don't have baseline data for those folks. They were already in the program when I started. And so I couldn't, I don't have that 30 to 60 days at the beginning. They started up and they were already up here, you know. But yeah, anyway. I hope I haven't bored you. But the reality is, you know, homelessness is a very expensive, very risky project for us all. I started into this because the university allowed me, but really I sold it to them as they were bringing a tent city to our campus. And I said, we're gonna bring a tent city to this campus, and what are we gonna do with them? We're students. We're, you know, all of the, we serve as students. So we've got students paying for housing. We've got students paying for meals, right? What can we provide for homeless folks here? And so I posed them this, you know, social work, social programs are a big dollar project with a high risk of failure. You can look at anywhere around and you can see that if you do it wrong, the people are still homeless and you've spent a lot of money and nothing's changed. I've also redefined how folks that are working in this area. Social workers are wonderful people. They really are. They're always so positive. I can't imagine working in that field like they are, and having such a wonderful positive presence. Some days it's really hard what they're doing, right? But I've introduced them to some tools where they can make some different decisions. And so it's been kind of fun to see them see things my way and then teach me things too. And so if we look at it the way that executive director of Acres of Diamonds, the way she told me the very first time I met her was that people don't become homeless when they run out of their money or they lose their housing. They become homeless when they run out of that relationship. So I just want to support social workers in making their relationships better.
Let's thank Kristine. We leave the room thinking the conclusion is that the pandemic is part of the solution to homelessness. Let's ask Kristine what questions do we have for Kristine?
So what sort of decision-making tools did you give them? Like, that changed how they approach, how they deal with the clients?
Well, so one of the biggest ones was actually, they did a rate and wait matrix actually. And when I was working with the city of Burlington, they were trying to figure out a few different options of how to use resources that they had. You know, they had a big building, they had some different shelters that were available to them, and they were trying to rank them, but they were not using any kind of, impartial way of ranking them. And so what they did is they actually came up with some criteria that they would all meet and then rated them on those criteria, and then actually went with which one popped at the end instead of just the gut feeling. You know, they actually tried to rate them all based on a similar attributes. So it was like size, capacity, access, you know, the things that would really help someone that was homeless and utilizing that service. So that's one that I can think of. The other one was that matrix that they had. It had a bunch of criteria. That was a small segment of it. But they really looked at, we just really had to learn a lot about mental health care. And when they looked at it, the first iteration of the matrix, they were like, well, that's not quite right. So when we went back, they actually saw how to go back and to adjust it themselves. The other thing, they wanted to buy an apartment building. And I was like, well, how much are you going to pay for it? Like, how much do you have to put into it? Is this really cost benefit? You know, is this a good idea? And I hooked them up with a tool to do cost benefit analysis just to be able to use their money better. Because they've not looked at that. You usually refer to donors and people on the board to do that who didn't necessarily have those tools either.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I found some interesting